Hey, my name is Shelly, and welcome to another weekly wrap-up. For scheduling purposes, I decided to have these videos upload on Saturdays just because it works better with my schedule and kind of my reading schedule, because for some reason I finish books like around Thursday, Friday. So it's better for me to film on Friday to upload on Saturday. Halfway through the week, I was very discouraged because I wasn't really finishing anything and I was in the middle of a lot of things. But I'm happy to say that I finally finished 2 books, and I've actually finished 3 books this week, and I'm in the middle of a book. So let's talk about the books that I finished. The first one being Shards of Honor by Lois McMaster Bujold. It was in last week's reading update, so I finished it, and I kind of am unsure of how I feel about this series and how I feel about the book. I think that there was a lot of really interesting concepts introduced. I thought there was a lot of really interesting characters introduced. And I am interested in the story. So I am giving it up to one more book in the Verkosten Saga series, which is a crazy huge 20-book long series. And yeah, so if I like it, it's something I'm going to be working on for years to come. Second update is I finished Obsidian Awakening by Sienna Frost. This took me a little over a week to read, and it's not because I wasn't enjoying it. I just kind of reached a state in my life where I really didn't want to read anything. Like any extra time I had, I would rather be watching something or playing video games or playing board games with my family. Like it was just, reading wasn't on my mind at the time, so it took me a little longer. But I did manage to like sit down and have like almost a full day of reading, and I smashed this out of the park. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed it. I talked about it in my last update, how it's very Game of Thrones inspired, and we're like in this desert setting with these like tribes or clans, and I absolutely was just so invested in that. I did, however, feel that towards the ending, it started to get a little bit convoluted, and there was a lot of time spent plotting. Not even like plotting and scheming, just planning things out. And that kind of lost my interest. And I do enjoy a little bit of political intrigue in my stories, but when it's chapters upon chapters of characters just talking about plans, I kind of start to lose interest. And that's just a me thing. I'm sure lots of people do enjoy that. The other reason why I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to, there was a lot of head hopping and a lot of introduction to random characters that honestly, it was the only reason that they were brought in is just to have a certain point of view, and then they were never brought up again. I wanted to spend more time with the characters instead of hopping around from character to character, because there's a lot of POVs. I would say probably about 10 different POVs. So I really wanted to sit with these characters more and really get to know them, because I feel like I was only scratching at the surface. But with that said, it was such a great book, and I'm so curious to see what happens. So I'm definitely going to pick up the sequel, which is available. So I'm going to be picking that up through probably KU again as well. Although this didn't really reach a 5-star for me, it was definitely a solid 4.5 to 4.75. And I really highly do recommend it, especially if you feel like fantasy hasn't been the best lately. Like what has been recently published just doesn't feel the same. This is like bringing it back to like what we love. There is a vibe to this book, like the desert setting vibe, but it's not the main element of the book. The main element is the political scheming and the characters and the turmoil. And also the world building is really great. So if you are looking for something like that, I do recommend checking out this book. Really, really do. So yeah, can't recommend this enough. The next book I finished like literally just yesterday, and I'm still kind of processing to figure out how I feel about this book, because I really enjoyed a lot of it, like so much of it. And I think that it was incredibly well written. There was just some plot devices and mostly the ending that I kind of didn't really like as much. And the book that I'm talking about is Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. Like this book is just absolutely stunning. Like in person, it's really gorgeous, and not to mention the interior cover. I'm obsessed. Like it's gorgeous. Okay, so this is a it's a sci-fi kind of contemporary book. So we're following Zelu, and Zelu is just down on her luck. She was a professor, and due to some circumstances, she was let go. So she's kind of down on her luck, living with her parents. And then this beautiful story comes to her mind, and she writes it. And it's a sci-fi story, which she is not a sci-fi writer, but she decides to publish it anyways. And it becomes like an instant hit, an instant crave. I'm talking about like Harry Potter crazy. Like everybody's loving it. There's going to be a movie adapted to it. And it's kind of like following her story of how she's dealing with the fame and the fact that her book is doing so well. Not to mention, it is also following her because she is a Nigerian American who is disabled because she was paralyzed as a young child. So her struggles with having two cultural identities that are very different from each other, but she is both of them, and also her family. And her family is, they're lovely people, but they're also very judgmental and very set in their ways. So it's kind of following her life and kind of her struggle dealing with the fame of being a crazy best-selling author. But within the story, we also have the sci-fi element, which is the actual book that she wrote is in this book. So you get chapters of the Rusted Robot book, which is the book that she wrote, within these pages, and you're kind of following two stories. And they don't seem very connected, but then the more you read, the more you realize that they are a little bit more connected. Although I really, really loved following Zelu and her life, and especially the food. Oh my God, the food that was described in this, and learning about the Nigerian culture, all of that was amazing and phenomenal. I really enjoyed it all. I did find, however, that this book was a bit too long. Although this doesn't seem a very big book, I did listen to the audiobook, and the audiobook was over 16 hours. That's quite a hefty audiobook for this type of story, and I did feel that although I was really enjoying it, I felt like it dragged a little bit towards the middle and towards the end as well. So this was a buddy read on Books with Brittany's Patreon Discord, and a lot of us kind of just finished it all at the same time, and a lot of us felt the same way. Like it was very like, we really enjoyed a lot of it, but there were certain things that just kind of didn't work, and the ending was the major thing that all of us were like, we didn't like it. Some people, they actually loved it and they gave it like 5 stars, and that's amazing. Like I wish I could give it 5 stars. The themes and topics that were talked about are very important, and I think that they should be discussed more. It may actually be one of the few books that I just decide not to rate, because although there was a lot of things I loved about it, there were certain things I didn't love about it. So sometimes it's hard to rate a book because when it's so well written and it's so beautifully done, but enjoyment factor just doesn't meet the same standard, so it's really difficult to rate. So I don't know if I'm going to actually rate this book. But with that said, I still want to pick up this author's backlist, especially Bindi. I'm very curious about that series. Even though I didn't really love this book, I think that it's worth a read because it does handle some pretty interesting topics and has some pretty interesting and important discussions. So I do think that that is worth a read. So on to the book that I am kind of reading in the background of everything else, and that is The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. I picked this up last week, I think, and I read the first part, it's a big chunk of the book. So I did finish the first part, and I think this is falling in the same category as Death of an Author, where I appreciate the writing, I appreciate the topics and the discussion that's within these books, but for enjoyment purposes, it's not the same level. So it's one of those things that like I can appreciate it, but I'm not exactly enjoying my time. I really need to have a character to follow and to root for, at least one. And I feel like the characters in the story, just as they were in Three Body Problem, are not the important part. The characters are there just to bring that story to life. So with that said, I am not in a rush to complete this book. I am curious because I've reached the point in the book before the time jump, so I am curious to see how it goes after the time jump. But yeah, as it stands right now, my enjoyment is just not right there. It's really not a priority, and I honestly don't know if I'm going to continue this book after, but we will see. I'm still going to give it a shot. I'm still going to give it like the good old college try and, push through to see if maybe it'll start working for me. Every time I film, the sun is just in and out of clouds. I'm so sorry for the wacky lighting. It sucks. Anyways, on to future plans. Okay, so I was planning to pick up Blood Over Brighthaven, but it was actually removed from Everend's Audible, which kind of annoys the hell out of me. And I put a hold my library, and it's like a 17-week wait. So I'm probably going to have to pick it up through Audible. And unfortunately, my husband has already claimed dibs to this month's credits. So I got to wait till next month. But a library hold did come in, and that was The Sword Catcher by Cassandra Clare. The audiobook came in, and I am actually quite excited to get into this because I've been wanting to read this for a while, even though this wasn't on my spring TBR. The sequel, I believe, is coming out in a month or two. As always, I'm having problems with my lights, so I'm going to put this down. So I really don't know what this is about. I know that it is adult fantasy, which is completely separate from her other series. And yeah, I've heard some great things, and I'm excited to pick up the audiobook. But I still want something to read once in a while, so I decided to pick up the graphic novel of Monstrous. I'm so curious about this graphic novel. I actually heard about this years and years and years ago, so I've been wanting to pick this up for quite some time, and honestly, these covers are just divine. They are absolutely beautiful, and the inside is absolutely beautiful, which doesn't always work for graphic novels because sometimes the graphic novels, the cover is done by a different artist, or the artist puts a little bit more effort into the cover, and then the insides are not that great, kind of like Saga. Saga is kind of like that. And I'm also really excited because I picked this up through Book Outlet. They were all like 50% off. I think the entire collection is there, so I picked up the first two just to sample them out, to see how I feel. So I'm very excited to get into this because honestly, everything about this cover just, it screams to me. If you've made it all the way to the end and you feel like commenting, you can leave a cat emoji for Monstrous. As always, if you like this video, please think about liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. Bye.